Welcome to another episode of VNture Podcast, your weekly source of visual novel goodness. I am Amar, and together with Tauros, we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. It's time to discuss ranking today. A test, if you will, to see if a taste in characters falls under popular or hipster. So, Tauros, what are character polls?
Hello, hello. Yes, character polls are pretty straightforward. You have some, collection agency, like a company or a magazine, that asks all its readers, viewers, and whatnot to submit their opinion of who their favorite character is. All the votes come in, and then, the magazine collects all the info, and then at a later date publishes this data. And so it shows who the most popular characters are. Usually, these sorts of things are broken down into specifics. Like, for example, it will be by releases for the year. So say we're in the year 2023 and people will ask, who's your favorite, visual novel heroine from a title that was released this year, for example. I mentioned heroines. You'll often also see these broken down by gender, where they'll ask for the best heroine or the best male main character. For the most part, though, you usually tend to see these for big companies that have put out a whole bunch of visual novels like Key, Type Moon, Leaf, so on and so forth. And so they'll ask, of their products, who are your favorite heroines? And, who, for a variety of reasons. Some people like to pick the ones that were like the coolest. Some people were like, their favorite waifu. Some people would like to pick, who had the most, story influence and left like the most lasting impact on the series or whatnot. So it's kind of up to the readers and the voters to decide what they think about who their favorite is. But generally, it's left pretty vague on purpose. And so these sorts... Oh, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, importantly, we need to also establish that there are character polls, depending on who makes them, are either run by magazine. So an example, what you mentioned, that they happen to, for the readers, they submit their votes, but there could also be company-wide, and then you only discuss their own IP, which is a different kind of ranking by that point.
And so obviously these character polls are pretty fun to see because you can see, how public opinion shapes up. And if you like, one of the lesser characters, you can fanboy for them and try to get them up in the ranking like, yo, number 4. And you could be happy that you got that high.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also something that is very important that you alluded to is the criteria is often vague on purpose. It's, okay, who you like the most. That's it. It wasn't who's the most gentlest of a character, right? Or shyest character. That's not the criteria. Popularity only. And I suppose likability.
I mean, yeah. A lot of times, a character being likable is pretty important for the audience liking them.
Yeah,
it's
true.
kind of chicken or the egg sort of thing. But these are pretty important though, because typically, Japanese and other Eastern companies tend to put a lot of stock into customer feedback, including these sorts of character polls. They really like sending out surveys and asking people what they thought and what aspects are their favorite, and if they could change anything, what would they do, yada yada. And so these sorts of character polls you'll usually see in sorts of, Asian pop culture entertainment stuff, where this really affects the company's future for the series. Which characters they decide to focus on, which ones, they were anticipating to be popular, which may or may not be true. And so it kind of encourages their fans to really be passionate about the characters they like, because it's really going to affect the series' future. A character unexpectedly placing in the top 3, for example, you can be sure that the company's going to listen to something like that and, feature them stronger in any future works.
Yeah, and this is an opportunity for those beloved sub-characters to be elevated to a heroine status moving forward, if there is a sequel or maybe a fan disc.
And so rarely you get the sort of popularity poll where it's widespread across multiple series and companies and whatnot. MR, there's that one famous one involving the Rance heroines and the Fate Stay Night ones, right?
Yeah. This is something I keep hearing about, although whether or not that was true, I'm not sure. There's two events, right? One is that the genesis of why the character polls started being divided by gender is because Rance started to dominate.
Rance.
Again, I have no idea if that's true, but that's hilarious.
Yeah, the main character of the Rance series, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and if you think about it, it makes sense. If you mathematically think about it, if you have a divisive character that often is either loved or hated, right? He accumulates votes. Unlike romanceable characters in a VN that have those votes spread out. So it makes sense mathematically that he could dominate polls. So that was the genesis of... Yeah, that makes sense.
Like
so
if you have
the one.
If you have something like Machikoi, which has its routes of like 5 separate romanceable heroines, then like all the Machikoi fans are going to be split between those 5 girls, ideally.
Yeah.
But then you have Rance, who's like a super charismatic, very unique main character, and everyone's going to flock to him. He's going to kind of half be the joke answer and half be the like, no, this guy's hella cool, I'm voting for him, best guy. So you got like the support of an entire Rance franchise versus, like I said, Machikoi being split up.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that would actually be true, that was the genesis of division between male and female, and maybe even protagonists aren't included just because of that. Because if they are, by definition, the popular choice every time, then they will dominate, or maybe they should have their own separate category. Because otherwise, how would those influence otome choices, right? For romanceable male characters. And the second story that we aren't sure, we aren't sure when it happened, is that story true, but that
it's
was
right there
the long... it is in print, but it was long-standing success of Saber, year after year. That was 1 year broken by the newest release of Rance series, because the newcomer of that title, it was 7th in the series, was so unique and so beloved by the franchise that overthrew Saber from the polls. And we have that screenshot running the button, that's true. But I couldn't verify whether or not that was true, that Saber had a long-standing streak of wins that was dethroned one moment. That's the second story I keep hearing with character polls.
That's always a funny one, showing Rance taking over the powerhouse Fate Stay Night when it was released.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But yeah, again, you have character polls to determine this sort of public opinion. Especially back in the day, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, before social media was taking off. This was kind of how, like, TV shows and, visual novels and all sorts of other media would tap into that public opinion. You wouldn't really get to hear all sorts of people's opinions because the whole world was so spread out and separated, you couldn't really get a gauge on it. And so these sorts of polls where you directly ask for people's feedback was kind of the only way to get a feeling for how your audience liked your characters. Nowadays, we've got stuff like, Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, TikTok, all that stuff, and you're just flooded with opinions now. So it's kind of the opposite problem.
Exactly. In the olden days, although how all that says us to be is a matter of different thing, but in the olden days, it was companies that reach out to fans for feedback, and now with the popularity of such things as tier lists, a modern example of popularity polls, it's the users who share feedback first, oftentimes, right? So because of the cult of memes, it's spread out to a different form, and people just love sharing tier lists And they are kind of modern incarnation of what was in previously the character polls or popularity polls.
Yep, absolutely. You, MR, just the other day, it's very good timing we have this episode because you got a little bit of contact from a certain company, right?
Oh boy, it's like, yeah.
What?
I wouldn't
Yeah,
be
tell us about
myself
it. Tell us about it.
if we wouldn't talk about Kickstarters, right? And it just so happens that I think it was a month ago, maybe a little bit longer, I got a message by mail, and they said, okay, we are gathering thoughts. This is the survey. Please fill it in. And this is what we prepared for today. I screenshot all my answers, and we can go live about all of them.
Yeah, for what company, what visual novel?
Yeah, this is about the Venus Blood, Gaia, the international release by Ninetail? Dualtail? There are two companies I keep messing up, which is weird. I think it's Ninetail.
Okay, and they're asking you for all sorts of feedback, right?
Yeah, and this is how the modern feedback is gathered, because they do incorporate popularity or character popularity poll, but also they want a feedback on the game itself and the Kickstarter process. And the first thing they ask, and for those who listen to the podcast, I'll be reading both the options, the questions, and my detailed answers if there are custom boxes to fill in details, okay? So the very first question is, have you cleared the game? That makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Makes sense. It is divided into, no, but currently playing, and no, I haven't started. So yeah, I finished. If there would be an answer, did you complete the game? I definitely completed.
Okay. So yeah, the point is they want to know, where you are, so that you have a full opinion.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, because maybe for those who just started, this is also valuable. The first impressions, early impression, also cool. But this gives a context. And then the second is pretty generic: is how satisfied were you with your play experience? And again, probably a very loose term of play. Read gameplay, because it's a gameplay VM.
Okay.
I just trust my gut. I said, yeah, I was satisfied. The game was really fun, and the dungeon defense aspect was very interesting.
Okay, what about the interesting questions, MR?
Okay, I'm getting to those. Yeah.
Oh man.
So some first question I like generic. Okay, are you satisfied? Yeah, I am. I like the game. The first one that broke me. They asked me about the difficulty, and it was not October. I think it was before that. It's September. I mentioned that. Oh boy, that game broke my spirit, because I felt like, yeah, I like strategy game. Hard, no problem. Nope, it broke me. I needed to return to normal. That game broke my spirit. Yeah, but difficulty is fine. Once you get used to it, since I'm playing right now, I haven't finished on hard. I'm pretty far into the game. Yeah, once you understand this, it's good. The difficulty was good. They ask you about the content. Have you tried those higher difficulties and all the stuff? Yeah, I tried it.
Okay.
Probably the most divisive question ever is, what do you look for in a VB release? Oh, this was a hard one. And as much as I wanted to click story, you know what? I actually have to fault to you, Powers. Whenever we have our spat, our discussion about setting, characters, blah, 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 it is characters. It is characters. It will trump story. I know it, because I had some qualms with the Gaia's story. It wasn't as engaging as previous Venus Bloods, but the characters were so freaking fun. It has to be number one. And the second is, probably because this is their trademark, their incorporation of gameplay, and the feedback loop it creates to the story. It has to be number 2. But I really, really struggle with that question, because its story is important. I remember fondly the very first Venus Blood. It was such a cool story based around Nordic mythologies, obviously treated with animification beam, right? But it has so many cool Nordic references.
So when
so
they gave you a list of things that they wanted to ask you about. What's your favorite part of Venus Blood, right? And exactly. So some of the options were like music, some of like the characters, the plot, gameplay, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so they're asking you for like what you look forward to, so that they can judge it for their future projects, right?
Yes, exactly. And the tricky part of that question is you cannot select more than 2. That's why I was agonizing. That's the killer.
They make you only pick 2.
Yeah. And that was hard to narrow down, because a lot of those matter. Background songs, it matters. Story matters. I wasn't sure about the goods and merchandise, because they expanded that question toward even the Kickstarter rewards. But ultimately, I buy a lot of those, so maybe I should also check that box. In the details, though, this is something that is very unique to the Venus Blood Kickstarter. This is something I haven't experienced anywhere else in any VN localization project. There are backer-funded events. So think about it. If you could, as a backer, as someone who backs a project in Kickstarter, fund a portion of a game that resembles Fundisks. Think about it that way. It's not really a Fundisk, but it does get incorporated in a side quest, in a side story somehow. And those are super clever and creatively woven into the story. It's such a blast to see those. That's a super unique aspect of that Kickstarter. I haven't experienced that in any other series than Venus Blood. To me, that's super important now.
Okay.
No one does that like them. Now, we could discuss pros and cons of a story that is modular, that you can add or subtract some side quest to it, right? Because it could be detrimental.
Are we?
But that's a story for another time. Okay. But again, that is very unique. I think, I want that continued.
So,
some of those events are absolutely hilarious.
It's something that you'd absolutely want them to stick with and continue doing in the future.
Exactly.
That's a good thing they're asking. That's how they get to hear your opinions.
And just after that one, the very difficult question about what's the best aspect. I'm looking forward in VB. They go for the hard question.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Just after that difficult question of pinpointing aspects of a game that I like the most, now is another hard question, which is the characters I like the most. So now we go to the popularity poll. And cleverly, they asked all those respondents to rank 3 characters. So top 1, top favorite, then the silver medalist, and the bronze medalist. First, second, and third place. It was difficult. I mean, I spoke, whenever I spoke about that title, I brought up the merchant, the harpy. And she didn't win. No, it has to go to the vampire. She was consistently amazing, whereas the harpy gets a second place just because she was tied to probably the worst area and story ever in that title. The character was amazing, but the story she was associated with is like, give or take.
Yeah, that is a natural side effect of asking for these character polls. Sometimes you get quality characters that you really enjoy, but they're unfortunately tied to awful story twists or just badly written chapters or other, very unfortunate sub-quality aspects of the VN that they get stuck associated with.
Yeah, exactly. And she suffered from chapter. Very chapter I didn't really enjoy. So, but overall, probably my favorite character. And the one that took the first place, the noble vampire lady, was such a unique twist of a clumsy Ojo-sama. Just how cleverly they portrayed her and how good her own chapter was elevates her to the top.
Okay. Now, there's one unique thing about this that, other popularity polls take different approaches, but they specifically asked you for who would you rank as your favorite, and then who would you rank as your second favorite, and then who would you rank as your third favorite.
Yep.
That's very interesting because sometimes they'll just ask you, what's your one favorite character? And then they're done. That's it.
Yeah.
But in this case, yeah, exactly. In this case, they're specifically breaking it down into like a top 3 sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which, that does create different vibes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly.
In which case...
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably if they asked for one only, maybe I actually went with the Harpy girl just because I like her the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because I had a ranking of 3 and I could incorporate it more than just character and her associated story, I said, okay, second place. Yeah, it is a different vibe. You are correct.
It also, puts more thought into it because now you got to judge the comparisons. You got to think of, okay, maybe I've got my favorite character, but who's my second favorite? Because that's not something you typically think about. Yeah, exactly. Then you get to third, and now you're like, oh, now I got to judge this between you and the other, rest of the cast.
Yeah, and it kind of resembles, in a small way, a tier list, right?
Mm-hmm.
I essentially put them in tiers and pick the top 3 out of that.
Whatever works.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interestingly enough, moving forward, the next question was about sub-characters. So they specifically divided main heroines with sub-characters. And just to clarify why the division is here, because sub-characters in Venus Blood are the characters in plot that are based around units that exist across all games. So there is a character of Nocturne Scholar. It's a dark elf and she uses electricity, okay?
Okay.
And she exists as a recruitable unit in all games, right? But in this game specifically, she also exists in a story.
Oh.
So she has voice lines and events like that.
So yes, throughout the series, they've been the generic recruitable, army fodder.
Exactly. Yep.
And in this game, you're saying they finally give some loving attention to the general.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
and
sweet.
It's kind of a rotation because different game has a different sub-characters from that pool of generic recruitables. So it's really cool that they acknowledge that and give you, pick 4 that you liked.
Okay. Yeah. In fact, it sounds like that was an emphasis of the game then, right?
Yeah. Because you have so much units, fleshing out some of them creates a cool feedback loop. Yeah, I care about those units even more because they are cool in the story. And the one I like the most is actually that Nocturne Scholar. It was the dark elf that is fascinated about science and all discoveries. And it just vibes so well with protagonist that is also a mad scientist. And their discussion is always hilarious. So, yeah. I love those segments. Those are amazing. Okay, what's next? Oh, they ask about Kickstarter goods. Again, I buy Kickstarter goods. For example, Dakimakuras I'm mostly now collecting because I'm not opening that.
Yeah.
I like keychains.
I'm sorry, did they ask you how much you care about the Kickstarter goods? Or how much you like them? Or
just goods you are interested in. And then you can... Yeah. I think out of all of them, I oddly enough care about the steel mugs because they are absolutely great quality.
Oh. Steel cups. Okay.
I'm drinking from one right now.
I don't want to get too much off topic or whatever, but yeah, Kickstarters is crucial to a visual novel development getting successful or not. And that's honestly more on the business side of things. You could create, the best visual novel ever, but if you can't advertise it well and get it funded, then it doesn't matter. Then you have some titles which are pretty bad, but they knew how to target their audience and they raked in all the money from fans.
Yeah.
So absolutely, that's something that if the company is running a feedback form on, they absolutely want to know what their customers want in future Kickstarters to make it successful.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they are very interestingly enough asking about the experience with their franchise and their series of games. And honest to God, when I was answering this question of please select the titles you have played before, I almost forgot about Ars Magna. Okay? So in some ways it was so forgettable.
Oh, harsh.
I'm sorry. I just almost forgot about that title. And probably I mentioned before, out of 2 resolutions, one was so barren and nothing burger. It's like, ugh.
Okay.
So I almost forgot about that. Was hilarious. But they actually, this is something that I did not expect. I was quite surprised by that because they asked what to translate next if I could have influence, right?
Oh, they asked you
given a choice.
Yeah, which other ones of their untranslated projects you'd love to see?
Yes.
Ooh.
And this is quite difficult because Venus Blood as a series is disconnected. It is more like Final Fantasy. They don't have a continuation. They just have somewhat similar fauna that they share across the titles. But other than that, the story doesn't really continue on.
No,
except one title, Ragnarok. It's a sequel to the first translated one. So I want that. That's it.
All right. Yeah, I feel like if you ask Venus Blood fans what untranslated title they'd like to see next, I'm pretty sure they're going to pick the one that's related to Venus Blood.
Yeah, but all of them are.
Well, to varying degrees, right?
Yeah, but all of them are Venus Blood titles.
Yeah, I mean, like the one that you mentioned was the direct sequel to the one they had.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sorry, I should have explained. But yeah.
Yeah, and
so it's good that they're asking.
Exactly, yeah. I think this is the only one that is a sequel to another one, and all the others are just their isolated stories. So maybe some people like the premise of, I don't know, Venus Blood Brave. But no, I want my sequel, okay? I want the story to continue. I want to go back to the Norse mythology. Bring me back. Oh, that was a cool one.
Gotta tell him.
Oh, and probably second to last, or maybe the last question was about non-Venus Blood titles that they have under their belt. Recently, I've got myself a Gears of Dragon 2, so I want a first one, okay? Give me the continuation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, totally. That makes sense.
Yeah. I want my complete stories, okay?
Yeah. Anything else in the feedback form?
No, that was actually the last one. The open extra details. I just filled in. Please continue on your good work, and I'll keep backing them. That's it. And submit.
You always got to include that last bit, asking if you have any other general comments or concerns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was a mod for that r/visual novel subreddit, There were a few times, especially early on, where the other mods and I put out feedback forms so that we could figure out what the community wanted and what they didn't want and what their priorities were, yada yada, and all that. And so, we had to put out a feedback form that was very similar to this. And it was extremely helpful. There were a few things that we were mistaken about, a few things that we wanted to do, and then the rest of the community said, no, I don't really care about that. So it was sad on our part, but we just shelved the idea and saved our energy,
What was the most disappointing answer you got?
Oh, continuing in that vein. It was like we wanted to do more community events, like Secret Santa and character popularity votes and competitions. And then we got a lot of feedback that most people didn't really care. They just wanted the place as a newsfeed. Like, there were still some people who liked it, and there were other people who enjoyed all the conversations and stuff on the sub. But, the most important part, and so our priority then, was focusing on keeping it clean and newsworthy.
Yeah, makes sense.
And see, that's the sort of direction you get by reaching out to your fans and asking them. Because we've all heard about the vocal minority, right? Where it's the people with very strong extreme opinions will sometimes yell the loudest, so you hear them the most, and you think that's far more overrepresented than it really is. Yeah. You gotta also reach out to as many of your fans as possible, because there's many of them that might share an opinion and they just don't vocalize it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. There's a lot of lurkers that don't post regularly, but given a survey, they will fill it in. And now you have an opinion you didn't hear at all.
Mm-hmm. So especially if you're a visual novel company and money is on the line and you got to turn profits to, keep yourself in business, it's very important to know what your customers want and give them exactly that. So so in some cases, MR, it's not just, the money you've helped to fund their Kickstarter attempt. It's also the feedback that very much keeps the company alive.
Yeah, I'm doing my part.
You absolutely are.
Yeah.
And so that's a message to everyone else too. Whenever those companies send out the surveys after the fact asking you for your favorite character and what you like and what you didn't like, please help them out.
It comes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they will learn from that and bring next thing with feedback in mind.
And that goes for us too. If any of y'all have any feedback, then you can either post in our YouTube comments, and maybe someday I'll whip up a Google Forms survey result and we'll send it out with the same stuff of 10 questions. Whoa. And we'll get all your feedback.
Yeah, you think you'll win the popularity poll?
Yes. Oh, no, we can't do that. You can't pit us against each other. Who do you like more, MR or Taros?
Let them fight.
No fight. We're together. We're running this, we're co-hosting it.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a guest won that popularity poll, but okay.
I would vote for Ange.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, on that note, we will wrap things up for today. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening in on this episode about character polls and popularity rankings. And hopefully you all liked the discussion and you learned a thing or two along the way as well.
Yep, and please leave your feedback form in the comment below. And with that, VNture out.
VNture out.